Hi everybody, and welcome back to another episode on developing this collected olive with Richard Wright, and it's great to have him back with me. Richard is here for the day. We've actually spent a lot of time this morning just chatting, but we're excited to get into this tree. And we were talking about the next steps, which is going to be wiring. And that is what we're going to be focusing on today. Richard, what have you got to say?
Right, so firstly, thank you very, very much for having me back. Delighted to be back in Cape Town and delighted for another opportunity to work on this really awesome tree. So what we're going to be doing today is the basic structural wiring. So essentially just giving it some shape. We're going to be giving the branches direction. We are not going to be pruning back at all. And I think that's one of the mistakes that a lot of people make on collective olives is when the olive gets to this stage, they cut them quite hard back, wire, and then start the foliage pads out a little bit too soon. And what happens then is that we get I'm trying to show you probably a little bit far from there, but you'll get a branch that's that sort of thickness with tufts on the end, and it just doesn't look mature, it doesn't look aged at all. So for my money, I'd rather wait a couple more years, let the branches thicken out before even cutting them. I know that there are some people out there that will tell you that if you cut off a branch and a whole little branch that's grow off that, there's as much growth on that little branch as if you left it long, but I have never seen it work that way with my own trees. Maybe you can prove me wrong. So I think it's better to give some shape and leave as much on as we can. And then the other thing, Terry, I think we're going to be doing is some partial defoliation. Is that right?
Yeah. So what Richard was talking about now with the branches allowing them to grow long is, I'm sure, a term that you've probably encountered before, which is sacrifice branching. And that is really just a technique, one of the techniques that you can utilize in order to thicken the base or the girth of the base of the branches, which is something that is, it can take a little bit of time. I see a lot of olives collected with very thick trunks, and then the jump from the trunk to the branch structure, the primary branches, is extremely dramatic. It's a big jump down to very thin branches. So we prefer a little bit more of a gentler transition, and the way to do that is you have to grow the branches long. It doesn't look that great. People are going to be wondering if you're neglecting your trees. But the thing is that you do need that length in order to get the sap flow, which is what will thicken the base of the branch. And I also have a theory, Richard, I don't know if you agree, but I think the wind, the movement of the wind, moving those branches around. So you have the branch at the base needs to fatten up in order to account for that. Yeah, that doesn't snap off.
I'm going to agree with that. And the other thing that works really well with sacrifice branches on an olive is you can imagine how much sap flow there is in something like this, and letting it grow even longer. And then once you cut it back quite hard, you've got an amazing amount of growth, and the tree responds extremely, extremely well to push out the tertiary branching. So although you might think it's going to take longer to do it this way, I find that if you can just be a little bit more patient, you get a better tree in a shorter space of time by letting it grow as much as possible.
Yeah, so Richard also said that we're planning on doing a partial defoliation, and as he also said quite rightly, we're not going to be pruning the tips of the branches. The moment we do that, the elongation stops and the auxins are redistributed, and you're going to start getting side branches forming, which is not something that I want at this stage, because our focus is not on ramification, it is on the structural branches and getting those right. So that's essentially your framework, your skeleton to the tree, and it's on top of that skeleton that you build the rest of, or the remainder of the tree. So the defoliation typically is a technique that you would use for reducing the size of the leaves, or to promote growth, developing or activating buds inside the interior of the tree. Those are other benefits, and you would use them at other stages of developing trees. At this point in time, defoliating or partially defoliating the tree is really just to aid us in being able to put the wire onto the branches without wrapping over the leaves. It just goes a lot faster. So it takes a few minutes to defoliate. But again, we're only going to defoliate the first section of the branch, because this is where we're going to be focusing the wire, and the rest doesn't really matter. It's going to all be pruned off eventually.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So this is obviously a follow-on episode on the last two, and if you haven't seen those two, go back and find them. I'm sure there'll be a link somewhere. But the last one was carving, and you will remember, or if you haven't watched that episode, let me tell you, the last time we carved the tree, and it was very, very rudimentary, very rough carving. And what's important is to understand that carving is never a once-off. And if you really want to get good at carving, it's allowing the tree to crack and to age a little bit in between each time you carve. And what's happened quite nicely in this one, and perhaps we'll zoom in a little bit later, is that as the wood has dried, it's already started to crack. And then the really nice thing to be able to do now is to go back into those cracks and open up those natural cracks, because now we're able to utilize exactly how the branches have grown, and a much more natural effect from a carving point of view. So the next time the tree will be carved, we can already see exactly how it's going to improve with age. And like everything with the bonsai, it all improves with age. So we're going to go ahead and defoliate, and what I'm doing here is literally just cutting off, leaving a tiny little bit on. I don't cut too close, and wreck any future buds, although we probably won't be using any buds along here. But as Terry mentioned, this more than anything else is just to help us in terms of wiring, and also make sure, because we're leaving the growth on the end, it will make sure that this branch really keeps on elongating, and at this point in time we're not wasting any energy on sideways growth. We can get it as long as straight as possible. So there's nothing wrong with pulling the leaves off either, especially at this sort of stage, because we're not too worried about the buds. But what I find with olives is that when you pull the leaves, sometimes you end up pulling off the little latent buds at the base of the leaves, and that's kind of sets the tree back from a future budding point of view. So this is a much safer approach. So on a branch like this, which this is probably going to be our apex, we definitely are never going to use these smaller branches here at all. We're probably going to cut this right back to about there. Ultimately, once we've got the diameter that we want to, and we're probably going to look at about double what it is now. So you can see, if you look at the transition between the trunk here, even with the carving to reduce it, but between the trunk there and this portion here, it just isn't. It's just not believable. It just doesn't give us the scale that we want. So to leave this bigger would be great, double at least, and then we're going to cut it right back and then start again. So what that means is we're very happy to remove these branches here, because they're not going to be part of the design, number one, and number two, it's going to mean that the sap flow really is going to be concentrated here, get it as long as possible to get it to thicken up. Right, so as you can see, Terry and I have completed the partial defoliation, a really, really quick job. And the best part now is that we really get to see the branch structure, we get to see what's happening inside the tree. It just makes it so much easier. And as we were busy doing the work, I mentioned to Terry that certainly for us here in South Africa, we're not used to defoliating evergreens, broadleaf evergreens, and why not? This makes it so much easier. When you work on a deciduous tree, you're always going to make sure that it is defoliated, partially defoliated, or in winter when you can see the structure. So as you can see, it just makes such a massive difference with an olive as well, and it's going to accomplish a number of things at the same time. So the next step is going to be wiring, and more than anything else, it's going to be to position the branches in the places that we want them, or their final places. So and we're going to make sure that it all radiates outwards as a tree normally would do in order to catch the sun. We won't do, I don't think we'll do many of the smaller branches, if any, but I think if we can get all the major branches wired at this point in time in this sitting, I think we would have done well. Right, so the wire that we're going to be using today is aluminium wire. Makes the job nice and easy. It's always really simple and easy to work with. For an olive, they're pretty flexible, but I find that I would rather err on the side of using wire that is slightly too thick than wire that is too thin, and putting double wire on. We aren't going to be, because we're not doing intricate small bends, fine bending, we are going to be able to space the wiring out quite substantially as well, which is also going to be great. Also means that we can get away with using slightly thicker wire and only one wire with most of the branches. Obviously the most important part is anchoring, but more about that a little bit later. So what I'm going to be doing, I always like to wire from the bottom up. So we'll start with the bottom branches first. Always apply the thickest wire first, and then you work outwards in terms of the grade, thicker wire. Sometimes what I tend to do is if I'm working with one grade of wire and not in a tree like this though, I might use that same grade for a smaller tree and then work on the next grade. For something like this, I'm literally going to be working on each branch at a time, starting with the thickest wire and then moving out. Right, so that's the wiring is applied. It went very quickly. It really helps to have the tree defoliated, and it also really helps when there are two of you working on it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the basic styling. What's the best part of this is knowing that whatever branch you touch, it's wired properly, and the wire is going to the branch is going to stay exactly where you want it, and that's always great. That's the whole point of anchoring wire properly. So we're going to go ahead and again start at the bottom and work our way up to the top. So here we are. I'm very pleased with the outcome, and I think Terry is too. It was great having watched somebody wire and style a tree for quite a long time, and as much as the wiring might have been a group effort, and the styling, it was great to see Terry own his tree. So the question I have to ask Terry is this what you had in mind when you dug the tree? So before you cut off anything, it was in the bush, and you had an idea.
Absolutely, Richard. Yes, I think what I've learned over the years is that when you're out in the field and you're digging a tree, you need to think of your time horizon. You know, how many years it's going to take you to develop the tree into something that you would be proud of, and especially when you have very thick trunks. There's a lot of people solve the problem of these very thick trunks and the abrupt cut, saw cut, by carving. Carving obviously is an important. I think it's a very common solution to this, and it adds character to the tree. But I do like to try and get a nice healthy transition from the thick trunk to the primary branching. And so when I'm collecting material, I'm looking for something that I can achieve a pleasing solution in, sort of a reasonable amount of time, 10 years or whatever, and without having to carve hugely. on the tree. So yes, to answer your question, this is what I had in mind, absolutely. And even when collecting it out, how many trunks I left on the tree, how many branches that I had. So yes, I mean, obviously there's always going to you working with the tree, so you can't have 100% your own way. There's imperfections, there's less than perfect branches. So, but yes, I'm happy with the progress that we made today. It was, as we said, a big step forward. The changes that have been visible were very small until today. So yeah, great.
Well, I think it's amazing, and I think it is, as we discussed right at the beginning, it's not the kind of olive we see a lot, which I love, and it is very much the way that they grow in the bush in South Africa. So I think from that point of view, job well done. As you can see, if ever there was an opportunity for this tree to bud back anywhere on the trunk, so there are two things I want to say. Number one is that not every single one of these branches is going to make it to the end of the lifetime of this tree. And that's the beauty, is that as you go along, you make little changes, you decide that this branch is needed, there's something else that's filled in the space. So there are definitely some of the branches that are not going to stay. And then perhaps some of the places, like for instance here, there's not a lot between this section of the trunk and this section of the trunk. And what we want to avoid is sort of just a top on this part of the trunk. But if ever there was a chance that it might bud back, it would be now. We've removed so much of the foliage of the tree, and there's so much more of the trunk that is exposed to full sunlight, which might very well stimulate bud growth. So this is, as Terry said, a one big step, but it is just part of the step. And watching Terry as he very, very, very finicky pacing things and then pacing it again and pacing it again and getting it right, and it's an absolute joy to watch. But the one thing to keep in mind is, as much as this is what we've got to live with right now, you're never going to see this image of the tree again. It's going to develop so many more branches and hide so much of what we have done. But that's part of the reason why it's so important to get that basic structure right in the beginning. You don't get this opportunity again.
And I think also I think possibly the experience as well, or having experience with growing trees through the several stages of development, one realizes that you can't just be styling or working for the now. You have to be planning 5 years, 10 years again. If I put some of the curves, some of the bends in the branches look a little bit exaggerated, but the thing is that in a few years' time, as these branches become thicker, those bends smoothen out and you don't see those dramatic bends. That's one of the things. And then also the placement of the structural branches, having to bear in mind that you are going to build ramification on those tertiary branches. And where does it have enough space in order to do that? So it's trying to create a structure that allows every branch to have to occupy a space that you can then build on, because that's how you create the sort of the volume to the foliage. It's so often see very flat pads. And they look great from the top, lots of bends, but they don't have the vertical volume. And so this is a very, I mean, this, we're joking a little bit about it and keeping it lighthearted, but this is a very important step
for sure
in the tree's life as a bonsai. Because
as I said, you'll never have again.
Yes,
it's so important to get that right.
Yeah.
So just to remind you, as a viewer, that the overall idea is that this is going to be a canopy, but it's not one solid canopy. So it's going to be canopy that's going to be broken up, and it's going to be very refined. But you'll notice from the front that, or from any angle, that nothing is on top of something else. You can see every single one of the branches. And Terry, can I give it a whirl?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So if you have a look, you'll notice that from all sides you can see every single one of the branches. Nothing is on top of something else. Everything is visible. And what was quite important is that there aren't any gaps because of the fact that it's going to be quite a full tree. So what we've done is to move branches into position so that there are as few gaps as possible.
Yeah, I think absolutely, Richard. With these trunks, you can almost, well, obviously it's a clump style, and as you said, there is a lot of natural or precedent in nature for olives growing this way, but you'll see that they all have this very round canopy. So ultimately, this will all conform to an imaginary outline, as you say, but there would be some, these what is denoted by or distinguished by the trunks, that would be treated almost as a little tree. This would be treated almost as a little tree, but fitting into the whole, it conforms to the overall shape. So individually, they need to all play their parts, kind of.
Well done, Terry. I think you've done an amazing job. Thank you for the privilege again of allowing me to work at the tree.
Thanks.
It was also great for me to watch you and to learn a little bit too. And I hope that you have learned something back home and can apply to your trees too.
Great. Thanks very much, Richard. So we're going to put this back outside. It is the time of the year that olives are growing quite aggressively. So it will be treated with Kohinoor. That's a great preventative treatment for whitefly and a few other pests that commonly attack our olives. So Kohinoor is a good preventative treatment, and it's good to apply it every few months, every 3 to 6 months, and when the tree is growing strongly. So we'll do that now, and there is already some fertilizer on, but I will add to the fertilizer every few weeks, and so that growth is going to ensure that the wire, as it puts on new wood, it will keep the branches in position once the wire is removed. Watching out for wire bite. Wire bite at this stage is a little bit of wire bite is not a problem because the tree is still young in its development as bonsai, but just watch out for too much wire bite, and especially now in spring, it can catch you a little bit unawares. But yeah, lots of sun, fertilizer, water, and so we'll watch it. And then what do you think? When will we touch it again, Richard? Late spring, early summer.
So I would say late spring, early summer. Let's see how it goes. And you might find at that point in time that something like the apex, this definitely won't be thick enough.
Yes.
So that's probably going to be a full season.
Yes.
But some of the other branches, we don't want them to get too thick, and then we'll start to reduce them. So it'll be reduced in stages.
Yes, 100%. Okay, all right, well, great. Thanks very much for watching. And yes, as Richard said, I hope that you've picked up some tips on what you can do with your collected olives. And if you've got any questions, feel free to comment below. And please do like and subscribe so that future videos you'll be notified of. But thanks very much, Richard, for coming again. It's always fun to have you with me. Yeah, working on trees, and the time flies.
It flies.
So thanks very much, and take care, all of you.
Cheers.